Would you say we're seeing a passive house movement in Brooklyn, New York right now?
I'm sorry, just what was it? What was it?
Passive house movement in New York.
Do you think there's a passive house movement happening in Brooklyn right now?
I think there's a, you know, it's a world, these are world issues, and it's happening throughout New York City, and it's happening in Brooklyn. It's happening a little bit more in Brooklyn maybe because...
So passive house is happening, again, passive house is happening.
Passive house has been happening in Brooklyn a little bit more often because there's a little bit more new construction at a smaller scale, and it's getting us to do a little more experimentation. And so we see a lot of passive house buildings happening in Brooklyn. It's a very active borough in the construction industry. And I guess there's more, maybe more enlightened people in Brooklyn and more people experimenting and giving us an opportunity to show what we're able to do.
Great.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead. Go
ahead. What makes this house suitable as a passive house retrofit?
So this is a beautiful house. It's making, you know, we're working in a row of buildings. And so when we have a row of buildings, we have a lot of neighbors. And so we have all these party line walls that are against other warm buildings, adiabatic buildings. So they're warm. So we're not losing any energy or heat because all the adjacent buildings are warm. And so that's walls we don't have to insulate. And then we can just focus on the front and the back and the roof. And that's where we focus all our insulation and our little extra costs. And it just makes it an ideal little project for a passive house.
Right.
It makes our job simple.
Nice, I like it.
All right.
Do your workers need any special skills? Do construction workers need any special skills to work on a passive house?
We have a really good quality contractor on this job, and we are providing them training. Some of the crew was with us on the last job, so little by little we're teaching them step by step. It's not rocket science. These are all basic technologies. We're just being a little more holistic when we're looking at all the different corners and making sure everything's addressed with passive house more so than in our regular construction.
Great.
Tell me about some of the architectural restrictions imposed by passive house standards, or even the inspirations, the opportunities.
So with passive house buildings, we're always careful not to bring any part of the structure from the inside to the outside. We always want to have a good thermal break. And when you have the same continuous material going from inside it out, a piece of steel beam or something, or a balcony, it makes it more difficult to make it a passive house because there's more insulating to do, and we don't want to bridge the thermal barrier of the building, the insulated barrier of the building. And when you do that, even in regular construction, you're causing condensation. So it's always bad construction to have that. And here we're very particular about we're doing it. We're having to invent little ways to deal with our creativity and making our buildings go in and out. It's a little more thoughtful process when you're building a passive house.
Great, love it. I like that.
Great. And tell me a little bit about the challenges of passive house construction in New York City. Are there like limitations? Are there like restrictions?
You know, working with New York City with passive house, in some ways it makes it easier on some projects. Because once we start to super insulate a building a little bit beyond the building code, beyond the New York City Energy Code, we're able to get a floor area bonus. It's part of the New York City zoning, green zoning. So that gives us a bonus. On our last project, we were able to increase the building 8%, which is like phenomenal because we did the right type of building, doing a well-built building to a passive house standard. There are little restrictions when we go to put solar panels on a building, on the top of a building. So they don't want us to go too tall, and that's somewhat understanding, but we're always stretching to the limit when we're putting our solar panels and scraping the upper zones of the zoning limitations.
Right, you've been in construction for a long time. Do you get any personal more satisfaction working on like a passive house as opposed to a traditional?
Definitely, there's more interest in doing the passive house, meeting the challenge. Sometimes there's a difficult site where we're not in a row of buildings and it's a standalone building and it's small and it's a little harder. We have to do more insulation, but it's a nice challenge. And we've been applying the passive house principles to all of our construction. So we might be just building to the new energy code in New York City. We're using the same principles, so we're getting, even when we're building to the standard construction, we're using our passive house technology and dealing with all the corners and dealing with it on a more holistic basis to address all the little leaks and insulation breaks.
Great.
And I guess tell us a bit about how you got interested in passive house construction and architecture and what led you to it. I'm just very interested in your background as one of the first.
I guess I had my car when the first energy crisis came here with Jimmy Carter, and you know that's always like it's just like I had an Oldsmobile and it was just like such a gas waster, and then I went on to a Volkswagen at some point soon later. But there's always been an interest in just like we don't need to expend that much energy, that much. And we've always been a nation of pennies to a dollar on fuel and gasoline. So with a passive house, we've been doing energy conservation buildings for the past 20 or 30 years. And when we discovered passive house, it's just like these people get it. And it's a beautiful energy calculation and energy model where it addresses all the issues of the building and it puts into a calculation and it gives us a goal and a target and we're finding it's realistic, that you're going to use X amount of energy per square foot of building, and that's what we find to be beautiful.
And do you think the de Blasio, goal for greenhouse restrictions is going to lead the way to more passive house construction?
I think with the new mayor and the new city council and the new Brooklyn Borough president, which we met with last week, there's a greater interest. There's bills before the New York City Council to make every city-owned building project moving forward a passive house building. And gradually they're looking to bring that over into the private sector, so all buildings would meet that standard. Similar to what's happening in Europe, where maybe 50% of the construction in the colder countries are meeting passive house standards.
Yay, perfect.